live.
All right.
Steve Kesselring,
Yep, that's me.
thank you for coming today.
Thank you.
So you are a state representative out of,
Hillsborough, District 18 in Manchester.
and now is that you just represent Manchester
I
alone?
represent Ward 12 in Manchester, which is like the northernmost part of Manchester. So my district goes all the way from Hooksett to Goffstown.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how long have you been involved in politics?
Basically, this is my first year, last election cycle. I never really got into politics much, and I just decided that I was going to run from, some experiences that I had with my daughter. So she kind of pushed me into this.
Really?
Yeah.
How so?
So she loved going on, listening to the debates and all that stuff from the presidential primaries. So what I ended up doing is she said, I want to meet, some of these people. So because we're the first in the nation primary, it was really cool to be able to meet them in person. So she had a little interaction with Nikki Haley, and her hat became viral of a situation for us. It kind of went crazy because she was given a free hat at one of the events.
Okay.
And the whole conversation that she had with Nikki basically went nuts. And we started getting contacted by all these other campaigns or these other people saying, hey, you should come to our event. You should come to this event. So we just decided to keep going to the events, and they kept inviting us. And from that, I kind of got to know a lot of the people in politics locally. We actually, Kelly Ayotte, or Governor Ayotte now, she was running, and my daughter wanted to do a school project for somebody in politics. So we reached out to Kelly to see if we could get her to come in, and Hannah would interview her and then write her school report on it. Because she's homeschooled, and we go through a co-op.
Yep.
And the co-op itself, we had her come in there. She got to see all the people at the co-op. But my daughter interviewed her, which we posted on social media, and she did a whole report on it for school. And that's kind of how, it kind of pushed me into that. I wasn't actually just set on running for state representative until we had that interaction with Kelly, kind of pushed us forward every step of the way to saying, hey, you should run or do something more.
How old's your daughter?
She's 11 now.
What got her so involved in politics at such a young age?
I have no clue. Honestly, it's just something that she's always loved, history, and she's loved things like that. I mean, we went on a whole revolutionary tour a couple of years ago where we started at the Tea Party Museum, then we went all the way down to D.C., and we had the White House tour and all that.
Oh, wow.
So she really wanted – we basically have taken her education to go – if she's interested in something, we'll take her to those places. So, you talk about the Star Spangled Banner written. We went down to, what was it called? The where the whole thing was written, where Francis Scott Key penned it down in Baltimore. And it was really, really cool to see the location where the Star Spangled Banner was penned. So
that's cool.
But
we took our kids down to Boston, and we did some of the Liberty Trail last year, and went to the old State House. That's where they have the old Sons of Liberty flag.
Yep.
The original one. I think it's like 11 feet long, but they don't have it on display anymore.
Yeah,
so,
we've done the Freedom Trail a bunch of times. It's a long walk. If you do it all in one day, it's not.
It's pretty much the only thing I go to Boston to do.
Okay. Yeah. Well, have you been to what we call it the Mother Goose Cemetery, where all those? It's funny because if you start looking at the headstones or whatever, you see Sam Adams and like family of them and different people. It's interesting.
John Hancock.
Yep.
He's there, and they have Benjamin Franklin's parents there.
Yeah.
The victims of the Boston Tea Party are all there.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they're in the front, I believe, towards the right. That's one of my favorite places to go. Awesome. And when they had all that, all the peaceful protests in 2020, that's one place I was worried was going to get vandalized because it's so old and that's irreplaceable. Yeah. The amount of history that's in that cemetery alone.
Yeah, so I just remember it was Fort McHenry down in is where the Declaration of Independence stuff. When we started going on the tour, that's where not Declaration of Independence, the Star Spangled Banner was penned there when the bombs were bursting in air and all that stuff. That was it. But that was the fort. But in that fort, there was the Declaration of Independence and all that stuff. They were talking about how all these things were in there. So like not specifically, but they had like a whole like, what do you call it, monument set up for each of them inside of each of the rooms. Mm-hmm. But then you could see where the soldiers' quarters were, and it was just a really cool place to visit. So for history-wise,
did you know that song used to be an old drinking song?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, the melody of it was an old drinking song.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know how it went, but that's where he got the tune for it.
Interesting.
Yeah, and then in Boston, have you ever been to the the USS Constitution.
Yep, we've been there once. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. Getting on there, and then you realize how small that boat kind of really is compared to what we have today.
All the wood that they had to form to do that.
Yeah, and the living quarters of that. A lot of cool stuff down there.
Definitely.
It's amazing how much history is down there, and then to see the situation that they have down there now, where they're basically like this single party state, you know, and there's so much rules and regulations that people are fleeing that state. In droves.
The more regulations and rules you make, it seems that the more that the people, they flee or leave. You go down to Boston right now. We stayed in the harbor last year. My wife and I, we went down there for a weekend. My daughter went to my in-laws' house, and we stayed at the hotel. And when we were walking around, seeing all of the new businesses coming up, but then you could see all the office buildings that were closed and all the places that have left. Insurance company says close, move to different places. I know there was one that was a huge building, and it said it was closed and they moved to Maine. So
I wonder if that's all because of COVID during the shutdowns.
This was last year, so I don't know, what it affected in 24, but
well, it takes a while for a place to come back too.
Yeah.
There's a lot of commercial industry right now. The commercial buildings that are just vacant now because they were shut down for so long.
Yeah.
And it's not even just Massachusetts. I know that there's places in New Hampshire that are like that too, where the cities just didn't allow people to reopen.
There's a lot of stuff when I saw in Massachusetts or outskirts of Boston. There's a lot of little areas that are popping up, let's say, or a lot of new industry going in there. But it's interesting to see that what type of businesses are going in there. It's most of the restaurants, it seems like, are doing well there.
That's good.
Versus the other stuff isn't. So
yeah. So how long? So have you been homeschooling your kids the whole time?
Yeah, we call ourselves the OG homeschoolers because we've been doing it way before COVID. We started from the beginning. We wanted our daughter to have a different life experience. So like one of the things that we talked about doing was like Battle of Gettysburg, take her there kind of thing, like show her history. So my business at the time, back in 2016, 2017, I was trying to build the company. So we literally had to figure out what to do because it was either me leaving for a long period of time to go to trade shows and go to all these events, or we just go as a family. So I think it was 2017, 2018, a little bit of 2016, we just were gone. I think it was 2018, we were home only 54 days out of the year. And I basically come home, go to work, do the things that we do, come back, see the family, and then we would just get back on the road again. So in that year, my daughter we stopped counting at 84 flights because it was just we were going everywhere. Mm-hmm. She was able to see Amsterdam. She was able to see, she was in France for a little bit. And then we literally flew back and forth. And then all over the U.S., we did trade shows. Wow. So she was able to get a different type of education.
That's awesome.
But
it's like a John Quincy Adams education right there.
Well, again, it's why she's talked to people. Like convention centers won't let kids in there most of the time if you're 16 or whatever. But it seems like she was able to talk her way into a lot of those scenarios.
That's awesome.
So she was able to hang out with us a lot at those events. And when I'm there talking to customers and trying to, let's say sell them stuff, she got to the point where she was just the best salesperson for us. So she kind of literally goes up, or people would come up to our counter and talk to us and she would just take over the conversation.
Wow.
So, that was, I think 6-7 years old. She was doing that really consistently well. So
that's awesome.
But
so she's going to be probably either a salesperson, a business owner, like her dad, or
I have she wants to works for the FBI now. That's her dream. She likes investigation. She likes history. She'll polish off mystery books like it's going on a style. So
that's awesome.
But
yeah, our oldest is 8, and he just started homeschooling this past year, and we've seen a huge improvement in his reading skills.
Awesome.
And he'll go right through a book like nothing. We've definitely seen a huge improvement in a lot of his, in a lot of every department, like the way that he's using the computer, the way that he's been reading, writing. It's just so much better. So I assume that you're probably a proponent for EFAs then.
Oh yeah, for sure. I basically, one of the things that I would say that I did in this whole process of running for politics, I made a list of all the things that I'd be interested in to be part of, or things that I would want to be like kind of push forward. In EFA, because we're in the co-op, we see a lot of families. So I've had so many conversations ever since the EFA program started. So I kind of had a basis from what actual people are experiencing. So a lot of the state reps, they hear about it, they say it's a great idea. Then when you ask them, hey, do you know people in the program? And a lot of them say, no, they don't know. I actually see it firsthand because of the co-op and different people that I've talked to, they're actually in the program. For us, we were in the program for a short period of time, and then we kind of pulled ourselves out of it, and that was only a personal preference. I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, the cost for us, the amount of money that they gave in the program, for us, we're just focused on making sure that we do the education things to the minimum. So, the $4,000 a year could last us for 3 years, just because we get a lot of the free curriculums and other things that are available.
Mm-hmm.
And the co-op, I mean, that's one of the costs that we incur because, again, are you familiar with co-ops and what they do?
We haven't gotten to the co-ops yet.
Okay.
We're starting to look into that now.
Yeah. I mean, that was changed. I mean, my daughter's direction, she was able to get into theater. And that's one of the things she does at the co-op. And she was just in the Finding Nemo. She was Crush in the play. So she's experiencing different things than she would. I mean, she started piano lessons. She transitioned from that to accordion now. She's doing accordion lessons and she does voice lessons on Mondays. So she's learning to sing better. I mean, she's got a beautiful voice. So
that's awesome. So some people, I've seen the people that are Republicans, but they're not for the EFA program because they worry about too much government intervention from the EFA program. Yeah. Is that something that you worry about with that EFA program?
I mean, you can worry about that with anything. I mean, the thing for me is when I look at it from purely perspective, if a family wants or needs, let's say, needs the ability to be able to have the finances to have their kids go to school, I mean, we should be offering that to them and giving that to them in a way. They only have public school options.
Yeah.
So the argument that I've heard several different ways is that it's taking away from our public school funding. Well, if you look at it, where's the money coming from? Like in Manchester, every single year since 2021, the budget has increased. And the student enrollment, right now this year is the first year that it's kind of leveled out and it stayed the same. But I think it was around $23 million increase this year. That's a huge number. Percentage-wise, I think it was growing. I think the biggest jump was about 18%, if I remember correctly. And the argument that the schools or the public schools are losing money, to me, is just a moot point. Because if you look at all of the money the city of Manchester has increased, it just keeps growing. So, again, I talk with my hands. So
No, you're fine. Now, while the budget's increasing, is enrollment going down in your area?
Enrollment, like I said, is kind of flatlined. It's kind of leveled out. It hasn't grown or anything in the last year, but it did prior to it did drop. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you think that that's just a byproduct of people not being able to send their kids to school during COVID?
I think a lot of it has to do with people trying to find other options. I went to tour a couple of the charter schools in Manchester. Had a great conversation over at the, I think it's called one of the charter schools over there in Manchester. They literally gave me all the details of what happens to their kids when they leave the class that they're in. They normally go and excel. So like that charter school model that they've created when they go into middle school and high school, because they only do elementary, that charter school is given kind of all those kids are on the honor roll. Almost all of them that go and transition to some of these other schools, they're always excelling. And the superintendent, let's say, of that school, has a list on her wall of like all the kids that have left and where they've succeeded and all the things they've done. Mm-hmm. So it was really cool to talk to them and see the difference. But they have a waiting list that they have to do a lottery system now because there's so many kids that want to get into that charter school. So they literally don't have the ability to even take all the kids that they could have.
Wow.
So that's the type of thing that's happening in Manchester that I think you're seeing. Again, that's public charter schools. So like those are the type of things that are full, and they're finding other avenues to do that. So whether it's private school or switching to homeschool and doing the co-ops, I feel like from what I've seen in Manchester, even knocking on doors, a lot of people care more about finding a better educational opportunity for their child. That's one of the reasons that I think it's important to have things like the EFA program too.
I think the arguments, as far as education goes, should always be about the education of the child.
Yeah, and it's not most of the time. That's what sitting in the meetings at the mayor and alderman meeting in Manchester, we were going there from last June. We probably made every single one except for one or two. Mm-hmm. And the arguments throughout the whole time, it's always been talking about funding. Oh, you're going to cut budgets. They're not talking about student engagement. They're not talking, none of the people that get up there to speak, it's not talking about the education of the kids. It's specific to money, money, money.
And what aspect of the budgets are getting cut too? What are that they're talking about? Is it admin?
It's not no, admin costs keep rising. Obviously, you're looking at the line items, but I mean, again, transportation has grown hugely, and if you look at their cost for transportation, I know with fuel prices and all that, and they've tried to transition a lot of their transportation over to the budget or from outside sources and brought it in house, which again, that's what the huge cost is, but those increased costs aren't affecting, helping student outcomes. No. They're not helping the teachers that, all the resources they need. The saddest part about the whole conversation was when the Beach Street School in Manchester, when that was a whole argument, and the reason that the Republicans are mad at each other right now, why the mayor decided to go a direction. It's
the Beach. What happened there?
So basically, the Beach Street School was one of the biggest contentious things in Manchester that we've dealt with. I think this year, it was basically they wanted to build a new school, and the money was held because of the land transfer. So when Joyce Craig came in, she gave everything that they wanted to schools. Basically, they voted on it, got the board to basically push everything through. Right before Jay got elected and brought in, it was I don't know how many weeks or a month or so before he was going to take office, but you can go back and watch the video. It was basically just pushed through, but they forgot to do the land transfer. They didn't put that in the setup, so they were transferring the property from across the street. So it kind of held up the project of the money being spent. So what ended up happening was the mayor and alderman meetings every night, people would come out like crazy just to be able to voice their opinions about that they didn't want the Beach Street School to happen. I mean, again, even the mayor said it on the night. He goes, he didn't like what was happening. He wouldn't have spent the money originally, but it's kind of a situation where they've moved all the kids and they closed the schools. They moved them into one school, put them in portables. They made the situation so bad that they had to build a new school because they couldn't go back on what they did. So I think it was 2 schools that were closed in Manchester, and all those kids were brought to one school.
What was the original reason to close the schools to begin with?
Well, because supposedly that they were going to cost a lot more money to renovate. Again, whether that was exactly was going to what if that's true or not, let's say, remains to be seen, because of the fact that there was a lot of information that was being passed around that there was a cheaper cost to renovate the schools. There was all these different conversations. So that's what we heard at all the mayor and alderman meetings. Like it seemed like every week, and we heard that for several months. I'm sure that the board was, getting tired of hearing that from the public, but it was a big deal. It was a big conversation. I mean, that's why, right now, Chrissy Cantor, who's running against Jay this year, basically is making that one of her main points, that we shouldn't do that. We shouldn't spend this money, because the argument is that taxes are just going to keep going up in Manchester. So that's kind of one of the polarizing conversations that's happened this year.
Whenever there's a proposal for a new building, I feel like the people that are for the new building always say it's going to cost just as much money or almost as much money just to build a new building than it would to rent it. It costs about the same amount of money to renovate it as it would to build a new one. And I heard that argument recently in a local dispute around here, and when it was asked how much it would cost to actually renovate and add on to a building that they wanted to, instead of building a whole new building, they didn't have a number, so they never even really looked into it.
Yeah, that's kind of the way I feel about what the situation that happened in Manchester, because there was 2 organizations that had submitted different information. One was specific to the new construction, and there was just these conversations about what it's going to cost more. It's going to cost more, but there was no clear data put out there. There was another organization that did an analysis of what it would cost to rebuild a lot of the schools, and that was supposedly substantially cheaper, actually almost the same cost to renovate all the schools as it was to build the one school building. I mean, I think over the projects that they were renovating, it was a couple $100 million to do all the schools in Manchester, to edit or to fix them. And it's actually, I think, $17 million bond is what the city went out for, annual bond, to be able to pay for these expenses and these costs. So that's one of the reasons that there's a lot of contention right now about it, because of the fact that they went out for this much money, and now they're stuck and on the hook for this much money. And if enrollment keeps dropping and Manchester loses money, they're worried that it was just too much. I mean, the school budget in Manchester, with the federal money and the state and everything that they take in, it's around $290 million.
Wow.
So it's a lot of money.
So what do you think is going to happen?
The construction's going to happen on the new school. They're going to build it. That got signed off on. But again, as the state goes, the state level, right now the budget is being decided on, and the budget is going to be a lot. That right now the formula that we put and we passed through the House, I believe it changes the adequacy aid from like around 4,200 to 7,200. So that would increase the amount of money that these districts get. So again, it's going to be one of those things, they get more money. Well, the conversation is, you're taking the money away from the school districts. If the budget passes as it is, the school districts are going to get more money. Mm-hmm. And even if the EFA program, gets pushed forward, which it looks like it's going to, then you're going to have that as an option. So obviously the spending is going up on education across the board.
Wow. So. Our school budget was rejected during the last election, which then defaults to the old budget. Was it the old budget? Basically, the budget that they ended up getting was only like $150,000 less than the one that was rejected anyway. So okay. It's not like the people really took much of a stand as far as the budget goes. Yep. But I do like that there was a bill that passed the State House. I don't know where it's at in the Senate, but if anything, that the bill allowed, Glenn Cordelli was telling me about it. The bill allowed, if when you're voting on it on the budget, it shows you the tax burden increase over several years, I believe, and then it shows proficiency rates as well on the ballot. So when you go to vote for it, you get to see what the impact's going to be on your taxes, and you get to see how well students are pretty much doing. And I think that's a good thing for people to see when they're going to vote on their school budget.
Yeah, for sure. I'm not familiar with that bill specifically, but
yeah,
sounds like a good one.
Yeah, and I know it passed the House, but our taxes here are pretty high because of the school, and we don't have any real industry in our town, so we have a higher tax rate than other towns around us. Okay. So it's getting up there, and I don't know exactly. They don't have anything really to tell us as to what's going to change things or how we're going to bring that down. Or so a lot of people are really just kind of upset.
Yeah,
because taxes keep going up.
Rightfully so.
And I don't even think we've had our properties reevaluated since the last couple of years, where all these houses were sold off for twice as much as they would have sold off for 4 or 5 years ago. So,
well, that's one of the scary things that I think for Manchester residents is going to be this year. We're looking at the reevaluations are going to be next year. And it happens. I think it's statutorily every 5 years, if I remember correctly. So we did it during COVID in 2020. So now you're going to do it again next year, and by next year you're going to have that. And the prices in Manchester have gone through the roof.
Same here.
You're talking. The building next door to me was $490,000 of the unit, and they just sold the one across from that for $625,000. Mm-hmm. So that was that was 2 years ago that sold for $490,000. So like you're in the 600s now. So like what is that evaluation at $600,000? It's going to $200,000 increase. Your taxes are going to go up pretty big.
I feel like properties aren't moving as much as they were a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
but the prices are still up. So now we're going to get this reevaluation.
Yeah. And
then prices will probably start to drop. And then what you say, every 5 years they do it?
Exactly.
So in 5 more years, we'll get to see what it's going to be, but it's going to be rough. I mean, people are going to be going to their town halls with pitchforks.
Yeah, with all the costs going up of everything, it seems like food, we talk about eggs before, but now you go to the grocery store and you start to see a lot of other things that are still up, like, that. Obviously the price of eggs went down a little bit, but still, they're still pricey.
Well, right now inflation's pretty low, but we had year-over-year inflation.
Yeah.
Every month it was about 7 or 8%. I think 8% was the highest, and it did come down, but that damage is still done. I think that overall it's like 40%, 45% inflation that we've seen since COVID.
I think the hardest part is to look at, you look at it as a whole. When they do those national averages, they don't look at micro things specifically. So I'll give you an example. My industry, tariffs right now are what we're looking at as being could destroy a lot of our product lines, let's say, because we have a product that has a stainless steel, let's say, workings inside. That's now at a 30% tariff. Plus this other tariff on top of it is another 30% because now it's a separate, what do they call it? It's a basically if they have the tariff, we have the tariff. They add it on top. Reciprocal. That's the word. So we have a reciprocal tariff on top of the other line tariff. So now your cost is now 60% increased from what the product cost is. Again, we don't make a lot of this stuff in the U.S. We need to. We should. But how do we do that? Because the EPA regulations are so big. I mean, I'm dealing with this right now in the state with a bunch of different contractors, that one of which is in my district, how the EPA stuff through the state of New Hampshire is basically just slowing down construction. It's slowing down all these things. How do we expect factories to come back here if we don't fix some of these issues? I mean, glass bottles are one of the biggest things that I sell in my business, because we sell spray bottles, dropper bottles, roller bottles, everything in the aromatherapy industry. And that glass bottle is made in India and China. Because the glass is made out of amber, it puts lead oxide in the air. So the portion of amount that it can put in the air is 0.01% or something, or what it does, but you can't have any or something like that in the state or in the United States. So how are we going to move an industry like that here? So most of those companies are manufacturing, like I said, India or China, and they ship them here. I laugh at this, but it's sad, because manufacturing in New Jersey, they used to have the largest manufacturing for glass bottles, like beer bottles, all the Boston Rounds. And that manufacturing is now in India, but they get the boxes in and they repackage it. And it's the same company that's been doing it for years, but it doesn't say made in the USA anymore. It just literally has no box, no name, no anything on the boxes. It's empty boxes, or like no stickers, no labels. But I know where they come from, because when you look at the import thing where that company gets it from, which you can find, it's public record online, you can see they're ordering it from the place in the same factory in India, and they're delivering it to them. They're not producing those things. They're just reboxing it. And then there's the factory that was making it before.
So we don't even make our own glass.
No.
Wow.
Well, that's one of the things that I think is funny that President Trump actually mentioned. I think it was, or it was one of the people who worked for him, about the cost of certain things. And it was like beer bottles and all these things going up. And it was, it actually surged our sales, because we started getting it was like a glass shortage thought. And then somebody sent me the video. Oh, well, the president said this, and everybody's talking about glass because it's going to be a big deal. It's going to go up in cost. We're like, great, keep coming. So It surged our sales for about 3 weeks. Then the conversation kind of died out, and we saw, that kind of market go away a little bit. That was like, I think, a month and a half ago we saw that. But now with the tariff conversation, what ends up happening, I mean, most of the people that buy from us for our industry are other small businesses across the country that are creating their own products. What we've seen is a surge of, let's say, or a die down of a lot of those people making more, buying more products, because they're concerned and they're not selling them as much as they were, because there's just an unsettledness about it. So I think what's going to happen is you're going to see this all year. It's just going to go up and down based on, trends and what's going on in the market.
One of the papers that came in the mail for a car dealership had a ad on there, get it before the tariffs.
Yeah, of course. They're going to play off that.
Yeah, which I don't know how true that is, or how much prices are actually going to go up. But I don't know. What do you think of the tariff situation?
So I see why the administration wants to do it. I mean, if you look back at historical 1800s, you look at how that income tax was basically, making more money in tariffs than that. But I mean, I look at what President Trump just said about Walmart absorbing the tariffs. And one of the concerns I have is how a company can do that. I mean, Walmart, obviously, they make a lot of money. They're bigger than me and as a small business. But the difference with what they have is they have a responsibility to their shareholders to make their business profitable.
Right.
So you're basically saying, hey, let's not be profitable. Let's take away that, it's not. And again, everybody says 30%. What does that look like? So I did an analysis on our products. So based on what we'd have to increase our cost on a product based on the tariff, it's around 7%, 8%. Again, that could be 12, 15% on a different company depending on their margins. But based on our margins, that's how much we'd have to increase it. So they're going to lose that much off the top if they try to absorb those costs.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen across the board, you're going to see everything going up. In the glass industry, all of our competitors, which I check, every few weeks, I look at what our competitors are doing, where their prices are. Within the first week of the conversation about the tariffs, a couple of them decided to raise their prices. Then as soon as the deadline of that tariff change, and as soon as the day, everybody started raising them, and they raised them incrementally. So one of the companies we work with raised about 15%. They figured they could get that based on the conversation. But the problem is they still have the inventory they paid for at the old tariff. They're just trying to utilize what they have as an opportunity now to get ahead of it so that they can pay the difference. For me, I kept my prices the same, and I'm not moving them until we get new inventory. So we actually have to pay it. So, but you're seeing people take the opportunity now to do it, which is fun. I mean, again, we're a free market system. You buy from whoever you want. Yeah. But at the end of the day, that's what's going to happen. You're going to see this boomerang effect of a lot of these companies that haven't or have done what I'm doing, where they're going to have to catch up to the other ones again. Because for me, I'm selling more inventory now on certain things because they've raised their prices. So it's supply and demand. So, but when mine goes the other way, then my price is going to have to go up.
Yeah, that's one thing I was thinking about because I saw somebody talking about the Walmart tweet that he put out, and I was a small business owner at one point during COVID, and prices were just going up. It seemed like every other month for what I was buying, and sometimes I would hold off if I felt like I could afford to do it. I would hold off on raising my prices because I still wanted to remain competitive in the market as well. And it worked out pretty well for me, but eventually I had to raise them. There was no getting around it. And back then, the price increases were basically because we couldn't get inventory. Everything was just backed up. I think there was a problem in the shipping routes back then, and you couldn't get the proper chemicals that you needed and all that.
What kind of business was it?
Insulation.
Okay.
Yeah. But as far as the tariffs go, we didn't have an income tax before 1913. Well, we did. I think they tried to implement it once or twice before. But after 1913, the income tax alone was only supposed to be like a rich person tax. It was supposed to be the top 1% were supposed to pay it, which we all know that didn't happen. Yeah. But if he could eliminate income tax and fund the country with tariffs, I think the majority of Americans would support that. And paying a little bit in higher prices, I don't think that would be such a big deal.
I just don't think you're gonna see that really quickly, especially with the makeup of our Congress right now. I mean,
and the tax system.
I mean, today we're on the day of the government's credit rating going from a AAA to a AA rating today. So I mean, you saw the stock market basically bounce this week. You know, it went one way and then it went back the other way. So I mean, we're in that cusp of what's going on. I mean, again, Congress is using that as an opportunity, it looks like, to be able to pass some of these bills and move this forward. So I know that the big conversation is the tax breaks and all the things coming for, let's say lesser incomes, which is needed because that's going to drive people's spending abilities. That's going to change the mindset. I mean, for me, looking at what happened during COVID and what happened after that when the stimulus checks went out, again, for me, it was great because I saw my sales it seemed like every time about the stimulus checks were talked about, I saw an increase in sales because people were caring about natural health and wellness. And when I would send out emails, they'd stay on the same kind of like time frame. But I've noticed that, those stimulus checks kind of boosted us up a little bit if you look at our scale. And it's interesting because, that's the mindset, right? It's the mindset. I have more money to spend, I'll spend it. So a tax break will do the same thing.
But when the government has to print the money,
that's a problem.
That's a problem.
That's a problem. I'm just saying.
That's where the inflation comes from for those stimulus checks.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And it's like running up your credit card. If you don't think about it, but eventually that bill's going to come and you got to pay it. And right now we're paying it. Oh yeah, it feels like so.
Oh yeah, look at all the credit card debt that's increased. I can't even remember the number. I think it was over $2 trillion nationally, and it was what $800 million when Trump was in office last.
So 800 million.
800. I think it was 800 billion.
800
Sorry,
billion.
Not million. Billion, and I think it went up to the couple $1 trillion now. But
and I think the same thing was right now with defaults on mortgages. People aren't paying their mortgages like they were.
That's like 2008. I mean, I don't see that yet, but I mean, I remember because I actually had a landscaping company at the time. I did that for about 20 years. I owned a landscape company. And in 2008, we saw everything happening. We saw those maintenance contracts not paying. We saw a lot of these companies that basically cut us, hey, don't mow every week, mow every 2 weeks. If you can do it every 3 weeks, do that. So we had them shifting back. But I was driving to a job one day over in Franklin and literally pulled into this yard, and it was horrible. and it was a guy that just bought the house. And he literally said, I bought it foreclosed and all this stuff, and he needed the lawn mower. We mowed that thing weed whacked it, mowed it and everything. But the house next door to him was foreclosed on. And so I started talking, the bank people were out there. I started talking to them. I said, well, what do you guys need? Because the lawn doesn't need to get this long. I mean, they didn't do anything. So I talked to the bank that was there, and they said, oh, yeah, just get connected. And we literally started doing house cleanouts. We literally did, like when a house gets foreclosed, we would clean out the inside of the house, clean everything out, and then literally mow the lawn, keep it maintained for the banks until we went from one bank to another bank to 5 banks to 12 banks, and then more banks from all over the country started hiring us to do their properties. So,
wow.
So I transitioned from a landscape company to a maintenance and service company that literally saved my business back then, because we went from doing, seeing our numbers go down and people cutting off contracts to getting so many bank properties in '08 that literally it just kept the business going. I mean, at one point I had 5 mowing crews that were out, or 5 service crews at that time. And 3 of the 5 were basically on house cleanouts. And it was just literally, we would get a call from the bank, hey, we need to sell this house, but it needs a smoke detector. So we would go and buy smoke detectors and hang smoke detectors for them because it didn't have it. And then the insurance would require us to go and take the bushes off the house. So we would get like weird calls like that were like random stuff just so they could meet their requirements. But most of it was just, I remember one house, we had 4 cars in the front driveway that were still there, broken, abandoned. The whole house was full of stuff. We did like 12 dumpsters full of stuff to clean it out. Just, things like that. We were hauling TVs out. We were hauling, like, people had just left. The one house had like the pot still on the stove and looked like,
wow,
looked like they were evicted and pulled out of the house when they were still cooking. But
I remember that. That was a crazy time.
Yeah.
Because I was working in construction then, and it just dried up.
Yeah.
And we were waiting for jobs, and people got laid off. And it can happen again. And
yeah, again, it's cyclical. It always happens. For me, I always try to pivot, and that's one thing I hate about being in business so long. It's like I see something happening. So like right now in my current business, I see what's happening. We're in a really bad issue with the natural health industry. Again, I was hoping that Kennedy was going to come in and he was going to be able to. Basically, his whole videos were infomercials for my business, and they basically talked about natural health and the need for it. But our industry, as Forbes said, I think in 2014, 15, 16, it was like the gold rush for my industry. The essential oil market went through the roof. It was crazy. Everybody wanted in it. And now our biggest competitor is people that sell on Amazon. And it was these other companies that were our competitors.
In China?
Yeah, exactly. China. So you've got all these other companies that are now on Amazon and other places, and that's our competitor. That's who we compete with. So I now, obviously we do a lot of business on Amazon because of that. And we've changed our business model in the e-commerce. I have a publishing company too, part of my business. So we print books and print materials and things for our industry, and that's a lot of what we sell. So for that, I've seen a shift. Like back in 2016, 17, and 18, we were printing, 3 or 4 new books it seemed like every month. New designs, new people. We were working with authors to create them. And then obviously COVID just destroyed that. And then we literally 2021, 2022, we tried to get that back. And the publishing company we pretty much got rid of most of it. We still have all the equipment. We still can print all the stuff, but we just stopped the publishing side of it because nobody was interested in doing books like they were. And then all these other companies popped up during 2021 that kind of competed with us in a way that we couldn't compete with them anymore.
Oh, yeah.
So it's supply and demand.
So what do you think about the whole Make America Healthy Again?
For my industry, I love it.
Yeah.
Because that's basically where I've been my whole life. The reason that I'm in the natural health industry is back in 2011, I had a truck fire. I had chemical burns to my lungs and smoke inhalation. So basically almost killed me.
Wow.
And it wasn't a situation where you could just see the burns.
Right.
It was my lungs, all my small airways were burned. And, I was going between Mass General and going between Lebanon back and forth just to try to figure out how to help me. So when I started using essential oils and natural health stuff, I completely switched my direction. I went cold turkey off my medication because It was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to try it. I can always go back to the medication. Not really advisable though to go cold turkey off your medication. Because,
what exactly what were you taking before, and what did you start taking?
So I have asthma issues, and I was taking it for asthma. I had reactive airway disease, is what they called it, because I had like the singed lungs. At one point I was taking 16 different things because I had bronchial spasms. I'd start hyperventilating when I was walking upstairs or taking a deep breath. My lungs were burning to the point where I couldn't breathe. So I had all these blood pressure issues, had all these problems. I mean, literally, my dad came up here and lived for like a month, and he took me to the hospitals and everything.
Was the chemical fire from the landscaping company?
Yeah, so what happened was I had a transmission replaced on my vehicle, and the transmission company broke a gas line, and they didn't catch it. So they gave it to me. I drove it up the road, went to a storage facility. The gas sprayed all over the engine block as it was leaking. And then literally as soon as I was putting my Bobcat onto my trailer onto the truck, it went up in flames, woof, because I had spilled gas everywhere as I drove, and it was puddling.
Oh, no.
So it was a blaze.
It was everywhere.
It was everywhere, yeah. And I was literally when I saw the flames, I was looking at my Bobcat. The first thing I did was move the Bobcat out of the way, but the gas kept coming, and I'm on the phone with 911. And the gas was like literally creeping towards an RV, like a $200,000 RV. I'm like, so I ran and grabbed fire extinguishers and I started trying to put it out. I used, I think, 4 or 5 fire extinguishers that were on the buildings, and I kept running back and forth while I'm on the phone with 911. But when I did that to try to control the blaze, I breathed in all the chemicals, and I had smoke inhalation and those chemical burns. So the fire department came there. They put it out, finished it, because the thing was I went and turned off the car right away because the flames were coming over the front, and it wouldn't turn off. It just stayed running. Oh, no. So there was no way, it just kept going. So they cut the battery, did all that stuff. But anyways, make a long story short, I passed out about 20 minutes after that situation that I was taken to, CMC and the ambulance. And the last thing I remember is being in the room with all these nurses and doctors, and then basically just didn't know what was going on.
So what do they treat something like that with? Like the medications that you're on, were they like prednisone?
Oh, yeah. Prednisone was one of the big ones. I was on a taper felt like 3 months at a time. What happened for me is I would go 2 to 3 months of like being fine, and then I'd get an infection in my lungs because there was no way for the stuff that had burned and all the small airways that were singed to really do anything. So they were trying all these different medications to soften it. I did a nebulizer one night, and I was taking the nebulizer, and my lungs, I literally felt like I was on fire. My whole body was like weird. I started hyperventilating. I took these little pills that they said when I'm hyperventilating. I did the rescue inhaler. It just wouldn't get under control. So then I had to go to Mass General that night, and that's when my dad came in. And basically, they drove me down there. My blood pressure was through the roof. I think it was like over 200 over like 150 something. Literally, doctor said my heart was ready to pound on my chest because I couldn't breathe, and I was literally trying to catch my breath. But they basically kept sedating me every time. Every time they just give me stuff, put me to sleep.
What year was this?
This was 2011.
So you didn't have any kids yet at that point?
Not yet,
oh,
no,
good.
No.
Because that's when you have something like that happen and you're self-employed.
Yeah,
it's terrifying.
Well, my brother-in-law took over my company at the time, so he ran. He came to work in operations and took it over, and then all the staff that I had working for me did a really good job of making sure the business actually stayed in business, because there was a period of about 6 months where I couldn't do anything really. I mean, it was approximately 2 years of doing this kind of cycle before I got into the natural health stuff, or give or take.
You probably couldn't be around anything that off-gassed, right?
I couldn't be around anything. I mean, anytime I'd smell like the barbecue, and it was almost actually like PTSD from all the smoke, because literally for like about 6 or 7 months, every time I got in the car to my wife, or I'd smell something, or I would like internally be freaking out like something's going to happen.
Oh no.
But that went away after time. But
so what did you start taking when you went cold turkey off all the meds for your, was it like sarcoidosis type flare-ups that you would get?
So it would start with like I could feel pressure in my chest. That was the hard part, the big one of it. And then it literally started into spasms where I almost felt like I couldn't catch my breath, and my lungs were like literally pulsating. So for me, it was directly to a rescue inhaler. Most of the time, the rescue inhalers would kind of calm it down, but it wouldn't stop it a lot of times. So what I started doing, because this is, before COVID and before there was a compliance issue with the FDA, so you could find information on natural health stuff and essential oils online, no problem. Like you could go on YouTube and you could watch a video about these different things. There was a huge movement in, I think it was like 2016 or 17. The FDA cracked down on all these videos. They literally tried to shut them all down. Really? Yeah, it was huge for the essential oil industry. They literally pulled off all these videos off the internet. and they literally stopped it so you couldn't learn. So prior to that, I was able to look at all these videos and get all this content. There's one video that I specifically, it was like filmed in a basement, I call it. It was like black and white on a little chalkboard. It looked like literally dryer over there, but it was a video about essential oils. And this doctor had gone through the chemical makeups of all the essential oils and literally broke them down. And when he got to cypress oil, he said, well, it's anti-inflammatory, it's antimicrobial, all these different things. But then he talked about anti-spasmodic. And then he was talking about oregano and cypress, how those two oils, essential oils, kind of work together. And so I started taking, when I had a really bad infection, I would literally take capsules of oregano. And then I would take the cypress, I would just rub on my chest just to kind of lower the asthma attacks. So between the cypress, using it daily, putting it on my chest, it kept my lungs in check and I could breathe better. And then the oregano oil was great. I mean, again, you don't want to take it consistently because it could mess up your kidneys and your liver if you eat too much oregano oil.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's not good for you long term. But I would do it for like 3 or 4 days as my antibiotic. And come to find, there's companies that do like chickens and stuff like Bell and Evans. They use antibiotics. They use oregano as their antibiotics for their chickens. So, like things like that, are already being utilized in different things. So I use that oregano to help treat those infections, and it worked great. So I got in this cycle, like I said, of infection. So I'm like, well, we got to find some natural ways to break these cycles. So I ended up doing the oregano. I did the cypress every day, preventative maintenance. I started taking, obviously changed my diet a little bit. I noticed that there was triggers, like tomatoes. To this day, I don't eat a lot of tomatoes because they triggered me a lot.
Really?
So, like, again, it's just whatever's in the tomato. Just before the truck fire, I never had an issue. I love tomatoes. I love pizza all the time. But now I have to control it. I can't have more. Like, I can have pizza one day, but I can't have, tomatoes for a few more days.
Is it because it's acidic?
Maybe. I don't know if it's. I find that everything that we eat and everything that we ingest, like, that's why essential oils are so great. They all have chemical makeups. It could be the acidity that we have, or it could be some other, thing specifically. Like in essential oils, there's a thing called lenolil, and lenolil is in a lot of the other oils specifically, and it's actually good for a lot of people. But a lot of people have an allergic reaction specifically to a lenolil, so it's any of those oils that have it in it.
Huh.
So, anyways, just an example.
Have you ever dealt with marshmallow root?
Marshmallow, not really.
No.
I haven't gotten into the herbalist side. I'm more aromatherapy stuff.
Okay, so that's completely different than.
Yeah, so aromatherapy is more or less the different compounds and things like that are aromatic. The herbalist side is not something I dabble in too much, so it's more or less on the aromatherapy side.
I have a diabetic dog.
Okay.
Yeah, so we've been giving him insulin since January, but I started giving him marshmallow root, and they say that it'll lower his blood sugar, so you want to be careful while you're giving it to him, and you don't want to give it to him for too long, but his blood sugar's always through the roof. And we've done what's called, what do they call it? You have to check his blood sugar every 2 hours.
Okay.
And you do it like once every other week or so. That way you kind of see when you give him his insulin in the morning and you give him his insulin in the evening, where his curve, where's his curve at. And lately he's been really high. So and we've been battling his high blood sugar for a while. So I started just giving him this, and now I've noticed that it stays pretty steady throughout the day when I give it to him. Okay. But you're not supposed to give it to him too often. But he's been having some issues, like urinary issues, and it's really good for urinary tract infections and stuff like that. So that's why I was asking.
Okay.
So
no, there's I mean, like when it comes to people, I always say citrus oils and stuff can lower blood sugars and all those different things when it comes to diabetes.
I've heard cinnamon.
Cinnamon, yep, for sure. Yeah, I mean, cinnamon is great. I mean, it's good digestive too. So, I mean, like cinnamon oil, like they put in a lot of candies now and stuff like that you can see. Again, I don't know if that's natural essential oil, but some of them are. Actually, there's a company that we use. They have like candies, like they have these like breathe drops and these On Guard drops and these different things to help you. But they're all straight essential oils. And those are what I use on a regular basis for, On Guard is for immune support. So I take those, and then the breathe is for my lungs and things like that to help me breathe better.
That's good. So do you still have issues with your lungs?
I still have a lot of issues. I mean, what happens to me now is I have something with my cells where if I get too much of one thing or I go outside in the sun, I'll break out in hives and I'll just like swell up everywhere. So like I went to my in-laws' house for dinner, something that I ate agitated me and I broke out in hives. My face started swelling. but it's almost kind of like I know it's coming because it's the first thing I get is joint pain. And when I know that I'm having a reaction, and again, this could be side effects of all the medication. I mean, the thing is when I was on all those medications like prednisone, when I did those long tapers all the time, I tore my Achilles tendon, and the doctor put it directly related to prednisone. He said, this is what happens when you take long durations of this stuff. It deteriorates your stuff so that it tears easily. And because I had been taking it and I was on a big taper at the time, that's what he said, hey, let's probably try to taper you down so this doesn't happen. But I mean, again, it was 8 weeks of me recovering from my Achilles tendon issue because just literally walking in my front yard, tear my Achilles tendon. That's something going on. So again, I killed my immune system with all the stuff that I took. So
yeah, so the oregano hurting your kidneys, I mean, the stuff that you were on anyways could have done just as much damage.
Exactly. And that all happened before I started using essential oils. So that's how I know that, like, it wasn't the essential oils. One person had told me, oh, you've been using oils the whole time. Well, I was worse off before I started using them. So
yeah.
Keep your camera.
That's all right. I think it's still good. Yeah. So 2016, they started cracking down on your industry then.
Yeah, it was early 2016, I think, is when they started really like going all in with the crackdowns. And I want to say mid 16, 17, it was like really bad. The FDA really got involved. I remember we had our retail store.
Well, they lost a bunch of money with you. So
Well,
the pharmaceutical companies.
Well, again, the pharmaceutical industries, I think, have kind of come around to this idea of like natural is actually better. So there's a lot of companies that have gotten into this industry a lot more, which is kind of interesting to me because you've got the natural health and the holistic side, but then you've got the industries that are trying to push in these natural things and labeling it as what it normally is. So
well, they probably have to now because nobody trusts the pharmaceutical companies anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, after COVID, they're saying that vaccine rates have gone down significantly.
Yeah, I heard that on one of the hearings that I was at. So
Did you?
Yeah, because I serve on Health and Human Services, or HHS committee. So I hear a lot of things that happen with health. So that's
what are some of the things that you're hearing through the committee?
just that the vaccine rates have dropped drastically. I mean, again, we voted a lot of different things on the vaccines this year. We voted to, one of the bills that we put forward or that we passed on the committee was to make it so that vaccines for kids in elementary schools and stuff, we would remove 3 of the vaccines and make it so that the Health and Human Services or the department would no longer have rulemaking authority to add new vaccines. We were literally removing their ability to. So it would be the legislature that would have to vote to add a vaccine back onto the whole setup. But that bill would have pulled 3 off the list. And that's one of the reasons that everybody didn't want it because, we're going to make it so that the vaccines are not required by the FDA, or not the FDA, sorry, the state isn't going to be able to add more vaccines to the list, but then these 3 are going to come off. So it was polarizing on both sides. So
there was another one that went through about vaccines, and it was something to do with the state couldn't mandate a vaccine if the manufacturer couldn't prove.
Yeah, it was placebo. There was 2. There was one that was a placebo trial, or if it was to prove 2 separate bills. One was the placebo. The other one was if it didn't show, or in clinical testing, didn't show that it stopped the spread of that communicable disease.
Which is the point of it.
Yeah. So that was the bill. So the one that was for placebo effect didn't pass because it was, as it was written, just really wasn't, good enough the way it was. And then this bill that we actually did pass it in the committee about it needs to be proven, but it's actually funny because the week after we heard that whole bill in the committee, Kennedy came out and said that, through HHS federally, they were going to start making all of the vaccines that come out have this testing that it's basically proven. So exactly what we were doing in New Hampshire is already on a federal level being talked about. So it's interesting. We're kind of ahead of the curve in some ways.
Why would anybody oppose that?
Well, I think that the reason is the people look at vaccines as this way to stop all these diseases, which, again, what side of the argument you're on. I mean, personally, I don't do that. Personally, I don't go get vaccinated for the flu. I just, I feel like the flu is, if I'm going to get the flu, I'm going to get the flu. Mm-hmm. And that's my mindset. So at the end of the day, some of these people feel like if they don't get the flu vaccine, something bad's going to happen. So they're so focused on that making it so that making new rules is the scary thing. It's not even looking at the bill. Like for me, when I get emails as a state rep, some of these emails that I get it's like, did you even read the bill? It's not what it says. Like you're getting all this information that doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's not what the bill says.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at that one specifically, all of the conversations around it are, well, they don't understand the conversations, let's say, or they don't understand what the bill is actually doing. They're not talking about the right question, let's say.
I think I commented on one of your posts like a week or two ago about something that you had received, and you said that it was basically a pre-filled. It was a email that was already like pre-filled out, so somebody just had to add their name to it.
Exactly. They just most of the organizations just put it at the very bottom. It says where they're from. It says like Manchester, and it says the person's email. Most of the fields of the emails that we get are all automated, and it's all set up.
Do you think it's more on one side than the other when you get those?
Oh yeah, for sure. And again, for me because I'm on labor too, so I'm on Health and Human Services and labor. So I'm the clerk of labor. So like I got to sit through the whole 6-7 hours of the right to work. So during that whole, let's say, conversation, all the emails that I was getting that were those things were all the unions that were literally having their people go into the setup and just do it. It's surprising to me how many people that are part of these organizations, or not so much that live in the districts, let's say, they will go to a company or whatever the company that's trying to connect them with the state rep. I've had phone calls where I say, hello, and then they say, hey, what am I supposed to say? And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I'm your state representative. How can I help? And then we have a conversation. I mean, probably like 20, 30 of those this year that I've had to field, like questions, like people calling me and don't have a clue what the bill's about that they're calling me for.
And you take the time to explain it to them?
Every time.
And how's that work out?
I would say that 95% of the time it always ends well because I let them know that I know this information and I know what it's about.
Mm-hmm.
I give them the details that I have. And several occasions I've actually said, hey, I don't know this information, but I'll get it for you and I'll come back to you with an email. And I take their email and follow up. One of the things that I find interesting is whether it's on both sides of the aisle, the Republicans or Democrat, wherever they come from, when I come to them with the information and all of the details, they're receptive. 99% of the time, they're all thankful that I spent the time to talk to them and to give them the information. So that's one of the things that I hear all the time. You answered your phone. Like, they're surprised, I think. And in a lot of the say services that happen during the right to work stuff, it would be union members that would literally be just calling and saying, leaving me a voicemail or something. They'd be surprised. I'd call them back and I'd say, hey, I just got your voicemail. Want to talk to you about it. And then I just want to hear their opinion. And it was funny to me, like wherever you come from on that argument, let's say on right to work, I had union members that had called, and then I asked them to tell me why they don't support right to work. And they basically argued for right to work. So I'm like,
how so?
So in the way of so I'll give you an example. So in Manchester, the Teamsters had an election this past year. A lot of the Teamsters that wrote me letters that were in my district, actually 3 of them that wrote specific letters or emails, all said they support right to work because they had a contentious, I guess, election for their union. Again, I not getting involved in the union stuff. They specifically wanted right to work because they wanted to be able to have their voice heard to get out of it. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the things that I saw a lot when conversations. I mean, you either love your union and you support your union and you'll back it no matter what, or you hate your union, but you still have to pay them and you still have to go with the services. So. And
for people listening, right to work it allows you to work in an industry that you would normally have to be part of a union to.
Well, any industry. So like right now, when you're a public sector worker, working for the state, working for city municipalities, you have the ability under the Janus decision to basically not pay union dues to your union. Where in a setup where a private, like, you work for UPS or something like that, you don't have that choice. You don't have that ability. I've heard different things like that. They let you get out of it, but, I've never seen that before. There's a ton of conversations. I mean, at the end of the day, New Hampshire, we killed the bill. The State House killed the bill. I mean, there's enough votes to indefinitely postpone it. So you won't hear anything about it again until the next election cycle. And I'm sure all the union people that I wrote a op-ed in the Union Leader in support of the bill, the right to work bill. And the reason I support it is it's a constitutional argument for me. If you have the First Amendment, you have the ability to have the freedom of speech. Like, you should be able to have your voice heard. They say that this is the way that you have your voice heard. Well, I would argue that if you're paying an organization that is speaking for you, that's not your voice being heard. So that was the reason kind of behind why I voted for it. again, I don't like to get into private companies' business. Personally, small businesses shouldn't get involved. But the Janus decision and all of the laws that we have in place federally, and when that decision, let's say, came down, it kind of made it an uneven balance for me, because public sector employees have the right to not pay the union dues where the private sector or whatever doesn't. So that's the way I looked at it. Again, I'm sure the union's going to come after me now because I took that stance, in the next election when I run in the next election cycle.
Absolutely.
But at the end of the day, I stood up for what I believe, and I stood up for the constitutional rights of those people. So
I didn't know there was a difference between the private and the public sector when it came to that issue.
Yeah, it was the Janus decision that really kind of changed things for.
When was that?
I can't remember the year. It was like 2018, 17, somewhere.
So this is relatively new.
Yeah, and when that came down, that actually changed a lot of things. I think it was 20 to 30% of the union membership in New Hampshire actually dropped, is what I've been told since then.
Wow.
So it was a huge dip. I mean, if you look at I think nationally, it's been a downward spiral over the years. But look, I can't remember all the statistics, but I know New Hampshire had a huge drop after the Janus decision once everything started moving. So.
Well, so going back to what you were saying about people reaching out to you,
yep.
That's part of the reason why I started doing this podcast and inviting state reps to come on here and talk to basically their constituents directly, because a lot of people don't have time to research all the bills. I think the State House had like 800 or 900 bills this legislative session, and I guess that's fairly common. That's a lot.
Yeah. It's over 1,000 with the Senate bills, so the House had around 900 or so.
And then then they go back and forth, and they're voted on, they're voted down. So nobody's keeping track of all those bills if they're getting up and going to work every single day. For sure.
And not only that, even in the committees, it's really hard to just read every bill thoroughly. So like for me, I have to station out times. Just give you an example. So like you got a bill that as language is very confusingly written. And it's basically pointing out all these other RSAs that we're going to change to follow in line with this one specific topic, let's say. So it's almost like it's a confusing process for anybody. So like it took me a good month of really reading through it, understanding, asking questions to understand, not coming from the legislative side and not knowing how to, let's say, read those bills. Because if you've got one RSA it says adopt rules from RSA to match this, and then you're like, wait, what is this? Now you got to go
look at that.
Yeah, you have to kind of look at all these different things in light. But again, like I said, it was about a month of doing it. Within 2 months, I really got it.
Do they provide you any resources of doing that? You on your own?
You're basically, you got people you can ask. It's just not, our orientation, I think it was 3 days, and we didn't talk about that in a detailed light. We talked about, how the processes work. Let me ask you, do you know how the legislature works from passing a bill? I'm guessing you do.
But somewhat. I'm learning it.
Well, let me.
Why don't you tell us?
All right.
You're the pro.
So in other states, there's a lot of legislation goes to the floor for a vote and it has a conversation and stuff. We don't have that in New Hampshire, so everything's done in committees.
Okay.
So basically, what we're doing is we're hearing all the testimony in the committee, and we're probably one of the only states that does I think we are the only state that does every bill that has a hearing on it. But I know that some states don't do it on every bill, but they do it on specific things, where New Hampshire does on everything. So we have a hearing on every bill. The public can come out and testify, do all that. Then we have an executive session after we've heard the bill. We vote on an executive session, and then wherever that goes, let's say it's, let's say it's a split vote and it's 10-8. It's going to go to the House floor 10-8 as ought to pass.
Is that when they bring it to the House floor, that's a committee recommendation that
Correct.
they're talking about? So
we're not voting on the floor for that to say yay or nay on the vote. We're voting to accept the committee's report. That's it. So in other places, in a lot of other states, they're voting on the bill on the floor. We're voting to accept the committee's recommendation.
Okay.
Then that recommendation becomes what moves forward. So now, again, we've overturned bills on the floor where it's an ought to pass and it becomes an inexpedient to legislate and it becomes an ITL, and we flip that on the floor. But we're not voting. The arguments you're hearing and the arguments and the PIs and all the stuff you're hearing isn't specific to the specific bill. A lot of times you don't hear every detail of the bill. You're just hearing
PI's parliamentary inquiry.
Correct. Yes, you know that one.
Yeah.
So anybody listening, basically, if I know that this bill would do this, and if I further know, then I would vote and push the red button.
Why do they word it like that?
And so it's just the way the rules are written in the parliament. I mean, again, you can sit through all those classes, which Paul, our clerk, is great. He does it every year. I think he has these classes for the legislators. I didn't go to that class this year because I had another engagement that time, but I try to attend as many as I can to learn more. But at the end of the day, like, it's a lot, because in my brain, I was thinking, oh, I'm going to be there because I was told 1 day a week, you're going to go on Thursdays. And that's what I was told in the conversation. And it didn't work out that way. So, I mean, I started on labor, and then they asked me a week before we were going to get started and having bills or whatever, hey, would you be willing to be the clerk? Well, what's the clerk do? And well, they listen to the testimony, and then they record the votes. Well, no, you record the votes. You take notes for everybody, what everybody says. You have to take all the details. You have to run all these papers and stuff. And again, I feel like the training that they give you wasn't adequate enough for what you needed. You literally get thrown into it.
Do you get paid extra for that?
No.
Oh, no.
No, same $100 a year.
Wow. And that's taxed.
Yep.
But you get mileage.
Yeah,
But you live pretty close.
Well, I get $18-ish in my mileage. So at the end of the day, for the cost to drive back and forth, I live 21 miles, I think.
So once that first vote on the House floor happens, then it goes to the Senate, right?
Yeah, so it goes from the committees
Yep.
to the House floor. When it passed the House floor, it goes to the Senate. The Senate normally toys around with it, plays around, does whatever they do with it, turns it into something different, sends it back to us, and then we have to concur on the floor and vote it. Or we have to do floor amendments, which ends up happening a lot, where we do floor amendments, we change it, kick it back to the Senate. And then if it comes back and forth, we have to go committee of conference, and they have to work it out and make sure the details are there. If both House and the Senate wants to pass it, again, it happens somewhat on bills. But again, I don't get involved in that much. I'm only seeing the committee side of it for the most part, because the only bill that I had my name on this year was the bail reform bill. Mm-hmm. So that was the big one for me. I mean, I was just there listening, helping. The other bills that I worked on pretty much were committee bills that came through our committee. So like HB 701, which was the right to try bill. That was a bill that I was really trying to help with. I stayed there. I read through it all, and we had some issues with one of the lawyers. We literally tweaked some things and made sure it was good, just to make sure that bill would pass, because that bill, I think, is going to impact a lot of people's lives here in New Hampshire.
And what does that do exactly?
So it gives the ability for anybody that's terminal conditions and stuff to have experimental treatments in New Hampshire. So basically it gives a legal out for the lawyers to be able to go after the doctors. So the doctors can do these experimental treatments that are not clinical. So it's not like in a clinical trial. It can be, but it can be off-label. It could be basically the doctors are trying to help this person survive if they're in a situation where they're going to die. Mm-hmm. And we heard compelling testimony about how New Hampshire could be the hub. So in Manchester, we have the Army stuff with Dean Kamen and all the stuff. They're making artificial heart and lungs. They're basically 3D printing them there.
Wow.
So once that gets ramped up and things get going there, I think our biotech industry in Manchester is just going to keep growing. If this bill passes, what it's going to do is it's going to open a pathway for all of these other people that want to do larger scale, like in Boston, and all these different providers are going to come to New Hampshire. They're going to open offices here.
Nice.
Just to be able to practice. But what I saw in the hearings is all of these people that have been doing experimental treatments, how New Hampshire would have a better law than any other state to get these treatments. So I think that bill is going to be a game changer to save lives, but I also think it's going to be a game changer for our industry here in New Hampshire. I mean, you're talking Manchester. We could become in Manchester the technical or the biotech industry hub for all of this stuff moving forward.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. As a state rep for Manchester, it's going to push Manchester forward, I think. But again, we don't have places for them to live yet, but
yeah. And that's another big argument. What about your bail reform bill?
So basically, the bail reform bill brought a lot of what we had back to the original setup. There was some changes that were made. Governor Ayotte kind of took it on herself to take over the bill a little bit more. Mm-hmm. Originally, I know Representative Berry wanted to kind of repeal everything and bring it back, and we basically did that, but we added a lot more guardrails, took a lot of what was learned over the last 10 years of trying to fix bail reform. what was learned about it, they kept in place, and then we just redid it. So again, the part that I got was to see the changes to the bill, see how it was going, and then literally just pay attention to everything going on social media for it, and just put it out there.
And at the end of the day, what does it do?
At the end of the day, it brings it so that if you're arrested and you're arrested on a criminal charge that's like, your attempted murder, you're not going to be let out tomorrow morning or right away. It basically holds those criminals that are for those offenses that are bad, where it gives the ability for them to get. Right now, they have what's it called? They go to instead of having to hear from the judge, they can get out from a magistrate. So the magistrate would have the ability to let them go out on bail or personal recognizance. And a lot of these people, like in Manchester, there was the big deal about the fight that happened. And the argument was that the guy was in self-defense and all this stuff. Well, he chased the guy down the street with a knife, basically. I don't know if that's self-defense. So, like, at the end of the day, like, there was arguments like, why is this able to happen? Why are we able to do things like this? And when I went on a ride-along with the Manchester Police Department before I got elected, because I wanted to know, like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it right. I want to know what's going on. And when I went on the ride along, we sat in on their update and all that stuff that the officers do before they go out in the field for the day, and they get all the information. There was a guy that was arrested, I think 4 or 5 times already, and the last time that he was released, he hurt, I think his mother and his girlfriend beat him up or something, and he was on the run. But he didn't seem to care. We found him. There was a manhunt that night because they saw him, and then they were driving around. There was officers everywhere. It was kind of cool. But we showed up there, and the thing that I'm going to remember most about it all, and the reason that I said to myself, we got to get this bail reform thing fixed, because he did not care that he was being arrested again. He didn't know he was being wanted because he didn't pay attention. Nobody told him he had a warrant out for his arrest. But he's like, I don't even care. He goes, I'll be back out tomorrow.
Wow.
He didn't care. He just literally you got all these officers out looking for him. We got all these resources out for a guy that just has been out habitually over, I think it was a 2 or 3 week period that they just kept letting him out, going back in, letting him out. But it's a revolving door system that we try to stop.
Now, where did we get to the point where he was able to even be let out? Is it up to the magistrate's discretion?
So the bail reform gives the ability for the magistrates in all the situation to let them out on their personal recognizance. That's why it kept going.
When did that start?
I think 2018 is when the bail reform bill was passed.
So this is before George Floyd and all that.
I believe so. I don't remember the whole time frame. I know that's when the bail reform conversation, when the bail bill was changed. I know that during COVID, beyond COVID, there's a lot of issues. A couple of officers that were, I think one that died because of a person being let out off the bail. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of, like, let's say, conversations that happened in that time frame about changing it. I know there was a change to the bail reform prior to, in I think 2022, but it wasn't enough. It didn't go far enough to stop them. And again, law enforcement, when we signed that bill and that bill signing, that room was full of law enforcement officers from all over the state who were happy to be there for that bill, because it's an issue they deal with. And it actually, in Manchester, we have an issue with officer shortage
everywhere.
But we have, the largest city, to be able to get to respond to a call. And that was the thing that I noticed on the ride along. The officers in Manchester are amazing. They're literally going above and beyond for things that they didn't have to. I mean, I witnessed a gentleman that had been basically, he had some, let's say, mental illness or something along those lines, and he was in the restaurant, and in the restaurant he was not paying his bill because he didn't know. He just wasn't mentally there, and he had been already trespassed by that same restaurant before. And the officers took it upon themselves because they knew that the guy was a veteran and all that stuff, and they really tried to help him out. Again, they gave him a summons and the ticket and all that stuff, but he's like, I know this guy. Like, the officer was really compassionate. And that's what I saw from all the officers that I talked to. I mean, a lot of them came up to me and talked to me about why they're leaving. Yeah. They wanted me to know that. They wanted me to know that they're leaving because of the pension system, and they're leaving because the pay in Manchester is not nearly as good as it was in other cities. Mm-hmm. So they came to me to tell me that. I know Mayor Jay right now is working on fixing that. So I think at the end of the day, you're not going to see that as an issue anymore. But again, I don't know if it's fixed yet. I haven't been to the mayor and alderman meetings in a couple of weeks. So
I haven't been to Manchester in a long time. How's the homeless situation down there right now?
I mean, it's one of those situations. I don't know, have you ever been to Salt Lake City?
No.
Okay, so if you go to Salt Lake City, you've got the downtown area, and I call it the 4 blocks that parallel. And then 2 blocks over, you have the worst homeless situation you've ever seen in your life. Like literally, I walked through the park one morning, and there's homeless people sleeping in trees.
Wow.
And they're laying out in the grass. They're laying everywhere. I want to say one day I walked from the park to, it's called the Gateway Mall. I walked over. I counted 50 to 75 homeless people that morning. Then the night I came back, it was evening from the convention center, there was more homeless people in the park just hanging out, talking than I've ever seen. I mean, it was over 100. So each time there's a ton of people there. But the reason I get to that is because what you're seeing right now with the Beach Street, I think it's Beach Street, whatever the shelter is there, around that area, you see the homeless population all the time. So you see those people that are unhoused, as they call them, all over. And again, most of them aren't doing anything bad. They're just hanging out because they have no other place to go.
So you're not seeing open drug use?
I mean, I don't see it because I don't go downtown enough, but we did yesterday. My wife and I and my daughter went to Elm Street, and we were downtown, and there was a person that was obviously on drugs just walking across the street, and my wife and daughter were talking about it when I was going to get the food. And it's a situation that you see in Manchester, but it's definitely a lot more cleaned up downtown. But like I said with the Salt Lake City thing, 2 blocks over, 3 blocks over, you have this whole issue happening. It's kind of what's happening in Manchester. It's not on Elm Street. It's not to downtown as much. It's moving over a couple streets. So, excuse me, the situation isn't completely fixed, and it's just a problem is a lot of the people that I've talked to, is I've walked on the streets talking to some of the homeless people that are holding up signs, and just talk to them, have a conversation, and they like their lifestyle. They like what they're doing, so they don't try to do anything different. So that's one of the problems. I mean, if you like doing it and you want to stay homeless, then why would you even try to do anything different? So,
but why is it being allowed to happen though? Because I mean that does drive down property values in that area, and it also hurts businesses in that area, and that's not fair to the taxpayers either. It's not fair to the people that are being allowed to live out in the street. It's not a good way to live. I mean, do we set up areas where people can go live and be homeless and have it?
Yeah, it's a tough part. I mean, I know the camping stuff that happened when the Supreme Court ruled that the cities and towns have the ability. Manchester was the first city to remove the camping ability and create the ordinance that makes it so that they could be out of the downtown. I know the Board of Mayor and Aldermen passed that quickly. And that when that moved forward, it cleaned up the downtown a lot. And I mean, you're seeing a lot going on.
It's getting better down there.
It is for sure, but they're not gone. They've just moved out. So I did the cleanup, like the trash cleanup for the city of Manchester a couple weeks ago. And we were walking, my grid or my zone for cleanup was over by the arena, or over, not the arena, the Fisher Cat Stadium. So we were walking on the trails, cleaning up trash and stuff on the edges. And down below was what looked like an old homeless encampment. And we found, as we were walking down the edge, we found one that was an active one because they had, fresh pots of food. Looks like they were cooking over a fire. And that's the type of stuff that, obviously we put it on there's like a app, C-Click Fix or Manchester, something that you can just take a picture of it, add it. And there's a lot of people that do it. And then those things get cleaned up. I mean, like potholes, like C-Click Fix is awesome in Manchester.
What is it?
C-Click Fix.
Huh.
So you take a picture of the pothole, you put a note in there, what street, it pings your location, you put it. So I tested it when I was doing door knocking.
Yep.
And somebody told me, it's like 2 days, 3 days, and you're going to see the pothole filled. So I said, okay. So I'm going to keep going back and looking. It was 48 hours, and the pothole that was there was filled. They did a great job. So.
Yeah, I've never heard of that.
Yeah, and Manchester has it. I don't know what other towns do it, but.
Not my town.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Manchester's a bigger city, and there's a lot of people. I mean, like, was it Saturday night? One of the comedians came, and there was lines at every restaurant out the door. Like, it was crazy. I've not seen anything like it in a long time. But, like, I was even talking on Sunday afternoon, I was talking to business owners for some of the restaurants. They said, we've not seen anything like this in a long time. Like, it was nuts. Whatever comedian it was that was here Saturday was, I guess, a good comedian. Brought tons of people out. So, anyways.
So the zoning bills, are those going through the House right now?
Yeah, so a lot of the zoning bills are going to be heard this week on Thursday. Yeah, we're actually there's a lot of emails coming through today about
really?
Ones that are good, ones that are bad. Again, there's some that I can agree with. A lot of the stuff, I think there's a lot of things that need to be tweaked in order to do it, and I think we're going to have a ton of floor amendments this week, which is going to make it for a long day. Again, I don't know how many we're going to have, but like example, I'll give you one. The thing that the argument about the zoning that we passed, I think it was last week, that made it so that a new subdivision over 10, I believe it's over 10 tenement or apartments, had to have, I think, one parking spot per unit. I agree with that, because if you look at the reports that have been done and the different standards that have been done, it's basically, for Manchester specifically, it's 1.5, 1.25 is about the average. So it actually makes it so you're mandating at least one and anything more. Now, the argument is, we're going to have all this stuff. We're going to have all these people that just no parking. They're not going to be allowed. Well, that's not real, and that's not true. You're spreading the truth a little bit, because I've talked to a lot of contractors in Manchester, and I've talked to a lot of property owners. They're going to want to have extra spots.
Right.
They're not going to just do one only, because then they're not going to have a good time or easy time renting a 3-bedroom apartment with one spot.
Right.
Like in those situations, you're going to have probably 2 cars, and they're going to want to have that minimum. I think what this does is it gives the ability for those towns to decide how to do it, but also the contractor to decide how to do it. I mean, again, that's one bill that I support, and I supported it. I think it passed last week on the House, or 2 weeks ago. The ones that are coming, like we've got the one where it's your right to build a mobile home park. You've got, or not mobile home park, sorry, mobile home on your own property.
Modular.
Modular. That's
there's certain towns that won't let you build a modular.
Yeah.
They want stick built.
Well, that's the bill that I've gotten so many emails over of why you shouldn't, why you should. And then, I mean, it's polarizing issues, but when you look at what it actually does in a lot of ways, I mean, like what is it called? Where you can build a mother-in-law's apartment is what I call it on your property, the ADU.
Accessory dwelling units.
Exactly. So,
but this is detached.
Detached, yes.
I believe that's what the bill is about.
Correct.
So it doesn't have to be attached to the house.
Correct, yes.
So you're putting in another bathroom and another, which that might work. Like I mentioned that with Mike Belcher. I believe that one would actually help me in my situation, because we got kind of a small house and we got a growing family, and I'd like to build a bigger house at some point, but I don't want to tear down the one I'm paying for. So what's the answer for me? I don't have enough land. I'm just shy of like half an acre to build an accessory dwelling unit, which I would be capped at 1,200 square feet.
Okay.
So, and then on top of that, the house that I have now could be my accessory dwelling unit if I get a variance. If I go to the town and get a variance for my land, but then my house is 1,250 square feet, so I can build the house I want and have the house I have be my accessory dwelling unit, but I have to get another variance or remove 50 square feet from my house. So
yeah,
for me, I'm like, I just want to build a house, and I think I have enough land that I could properly have a septic and a well on my property.
Yeah, and that's not taken out of the bill. So I mean, like that all of that. One of the arguments is that all these towns aren't going to be able to, water, sewer. Well, no, it actually specifically states in the bill, the way it's written, that you still have to go through those processes for water and sewer. You still have to go through it. If the town is assessed that there's not enough water, you still have the ability. I mean, the town has an out. I mean, that's one of the issues that I think is the problem. Like, there's people that are, well, I wouldn't call it lies. They're just not telling the full truth of what the bill's about. So that's a situation that you're still going to have to go through those processes for permits to do it.
Right.
It's just you have the ability to do it.
It's not that you can just slap it up without any permits.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. I mean, again, do I support every single one of these reform bills? No, probably not. At the end of the day, there's things that I think. And as I get more of the stuff for this week's votes, as I'm reading through it and going through it, I'm noticing like issues that I think could be an issue. And that's why I'm saying that we're going to have a lot of floor amendments this week, because there's a lot of those issues that I'm seeing myself, and other reps have sent emails, group emails out to all of us saying, hey, this is an issue, this is an issue. So like I'm sure leadership right now is pulling their hair out with all the amendment changes.
What are some of the things that you don't support?
Well, the problem is I support most of the bills if they're amended.
Yep.
I mean, like, it's just, it has to make sense. Like, I don't want to put so much stress on a town that it creates an issue where they have to make so many different rules to do it. But if it makes sense, it makes sense. I mean, that's the problem. Like, most of the people that are talking negatively about this subject and all these, and you're taking away from the towns. Well, I've talked to several people from towns that actually want some of these. So, like, some of the, I talked to one of the members, I can't remember the town. I want to say Brookline, New Hampshire. Anyways, there's zoning. he takes care of a lot of the zoning stuff. I don't think it's Brookline. Anyways, one of the towns. He's been 20 years been doing zoning, doing all that. He goes, I actually support most of these bills the way they're amended because they will help us because there's too many just red tape right now.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I think the object that people are looking at is this local control. Well, some of those town selectmen, some of those people, they want these things to go in place so they can do it.
Mm-hmm.
And again, if it goes too far and it makes it so that, like they have to make a ton of new rules and make a ton of new things to be able to do it, that's going to be way too expensive for the town. I think we should consider the idea of doing it a little differently, and that's where the amendments come into play. So again, I can't tell you specifically. I haven't read every single bill because I like to kind of cram the night before, the day before.
There's a lot of them.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. We get the white sheets. We get all these different sheets from all these organizations. Like I get emails for gold sheets, pink sheets, white sheets. So I look at them and I always try to compare it. So Wednesday afternoon, I normally spend a lot of time going through what's going to happen to vote on Thursday. But again, I've looked at a lot of them already, so I know kind of what's going on. But again, you don't know what the amendment's going to be sometimes until the morning of. So like you've got to kind of do your homework on the bill ahead of time. But
well, I mean, I think the problem that I see with the opposition of these housing bills is that they're not really offering too many solutions. We have a deficit of something like 17 or 20,000 homes in New Hampshire, and the average starter home right now is $450,000. So
yeah, it's not a starter home.
And that's not a starter home, and we want people to be able to have kids and grow families, and that's not going to happen with anybody in their 20s. So you're gonna be wait until people are in their 30s to start even considering it. And
it's funny you say that because the townhouses and condos in Manchester, I live in a 3-level townhouse, and that's where we decided to move. We lived in Bedford. We had the land, the house, and all that stuff, the yard. We moved into the townhouse because I didn't want to take care of maintenance. But I mean, you go from a $200,000 townhouse in 2016 to 2018 was high. That was an expensive townhouse. Now the townhouses are starting at $500,000 and $600,000 that were less than $200,000 prior to 2018. That's a huge problem for those. I mean, townhouses used to be the idea, we're going to move here, then we'll move up to a house, and that was like the starter. Now townhouses are pretty much to the price, or you're going to find another house that's a start or fixer-upper cheaper than you'd find a townhouse in most cases. And that's how it shifted huge. So in Manchester anyways. But.
No, it's up here, $200,000 or $300,000 house is a fixer-upper.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's something that cost $100,000, $150,000 5-6 years ago. Is the average house for like a used an existing home is probably about $350,000, $400,000. Brand new house is $450,000, $500,000, and there's almost no land with any of them. Maybe an acre, 2 acres. I mean, you're supposed to have 2 acres to build a house, anyways. But it's pretty tough. I mean, we need to figure something out for future generations if we want them to stay around. And I don't know what the answer is, but I think that these housing bills, to shoot them down and not have any solutions, or in some of the rhetoric I've seen about it, it's just kind of
it's crazy. It's just it's because somebody wants to push a narrative that they don't. And local control is the word that you hear all the time. You're taking away local control. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, if it's an issue and there's a problem, we need to fix it. It's not regulating and mandating everything specifically. It's just giving us, the state, the ability to look at what these cities are dealing with and say, hey, this is what we think can work.
Well, the state grants municipalities their local control to begin with. So there's issues, then it's up to the state to reform things and fix things. So one thing I heard recently is that there's places that don't want families with kids moving into their area because they don't want their taxes going up because of the schools.
If you look at the housing committee, some of the Senate bills that came through, there's a handful of them that went on consent. They were unanimous votes. So those are the votes that that passed those committees in the House, or the committee in the House, and it's going to go straight to the floor on consent. I'm sure people are going to pull some of them off consent, and they're not going to pass the same way. But at the end of the day, it's a tougher situation when you have this contention already in the party that, like you said, is trying to push forward some of these reforms. And I get it. Like, some of their arguments are valid. So again, I think one of the ones that I'm interested to see where it comes out. I know there's an amendment coming for it. Sorry, is the commercial building residential dwellings in commercial areas. That's one of the ones that I think it has a lot of value because you see that in other towns. I mean, if you look at Salem, what they do down there in the Tuscan Village, it's a really good model, I think, personally, for what bigger towns like I could see that happening in Portsmouth. I could see something like that happening in Manchester, and it's basically you're living where you go. You walk to your restaurant, you go up to your apartment, kind of thing. Like that's kind of
it's a city.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there is actually a unit or a couple new buildings that are possibly in Manchester going in, and there's an area in my ward in Ward 12 that's an area of land that I think would do great for it. But again, I think there was a deal for Dean Kamen's company was going to buy that property, but I think that deal fell through because they were worried about the shale and all the rocks that have to be built. But it's in a perfect area in the city. I think if done right and constructed, I know all my neighbors aren't going to want to hear this, but that could be the great area for that blueprint or that model, like what we have in Tuscan Village, because it's enough land. It's connected right off the highway. There's talks about extending the highway anyways off of Exit 7 there, and it would bring a lot of people. I mean, it's going to rezone my district because there'll be more people living there. But at the end of the day, I think that type of thing you're going to start to see a lot more, especially with that bill. I mean, if that bill passes, that's exactly what that bill's meant for, basically, to make it so that you can do that across the state. So
in the position you're in right now, what are you hoping to accomplish the most as a state representative?
So I went into this with very, let's say, small expectations. I didn't think I was going to be able to make a difference, but I wanted to be there to be a voice for my constituents. And the reason that I ran was kind of for my daughter, like I said, and to be that voice for people that might not be having a voice in our district. And then when I got there, I realized that, I could actually do a lot more than I think, because I can not only persuade people by having conversations with the people in the House and some of the people in the Senate, but not only that, I have the ability to, if a bill can just be tweaked to make it even better, I have the ability to put forward amendments and things like that and take my ideas and creativity and bring it into some of these things. And I now see how some of the amendments we've put forward and that I've worked on with other representatives have changed and transitioned those bills, and a lot of them have passed. So I might only be on one bill. In labor, I'm not sure I did too much in labor. A lot of the stuff I listened to and had feedback. But in health and human services, I've been able to kind of transition some of those bills, talk about some things that need to be changes, and work on those amendments. So that's been kind of one of the joys so far being in my first term, is being able to craft. I mean, I've got one right now that I've kind of taken on as my baby it's been tabled for now, or kind of put to the future. So in September, I'm going to have to bring something forward or make some changes.
Table means it's not dead. It's
not dead. Yeah. Well, tabled in the House means that you got to get a 2/3 majority to pull it off the table.
Okay.
In our committee, we retain it, so we hold the bill. So we've retained several bills in the committee. The one specifically I've taken on as my baby to, we're going to come back and we're going to fix this. And I feel like that's the key thing that a lot of reps don't get involved in. Like, they go there, they vote, they don't want to deal with that. Like, for me, if it's a good bill and it's something that we can work on, I want to work on it. Like, I want to spend some time and do it. Again, I didn't realize what I was getting myself into, let's say, because in January when I started, I went from being only in labor, which was 2 days a week, basically Thursdays and Tuesdays. Then I went to Health and Human Services. I was asked to join that committee. One of the people were taken off the committee. I was put on it. So I got a phone call, I think it was on a Friday. Hey, do you want to be on Health and Human Services next week? Well, what is it? So, again, I knew what Health and Human Services was. I just didn't know what the commitment level was, and it was a lot more than labor. Because labor, the Senate crossover bills, we were done in one day. It was just, we heard them in the morning, we voted on them in the afternoon. In Health and Human Services, it was like 3-4 weeks of hearing them all, and then we had to vote on them.
How many days a week?
So in January, mid to late January, when we really got going, and through February, I was there 3-4 days a week.
And that's 8 hours a day.
Yeah, on average, yeah. I mean, some days I was there, I'd get there early for caucus from 8, and then one day I left the building at like 5:30. So that was like the longest day.
That's a full-time job.
Yeah. I mean, that was the thing. It was like a little much. Like doing 2 committees is a lot.
And who runs your business when you're not there? Your
Well,
brother-in-law?
No, I don't have my brother-in-law running that one. So, so yeah, I mean, it's pretty much been a full-time job doing that, and then also trying to run my company.
Yeah.
My company's struggled a little bit because I haven't been there to kind of foster the growth and all this stuff. But it's kind of changed now that I'm not going to the legislature nearly as much. And again, I have to not having the perspective, not having a plan in place. I mean, literally getting elected and
Winging it.
getting thrown into it. Like, I mean, no, there's no training manual for it. And again, that day that my daughter did the interview with Kelly Ayotte, it was like we barely touched the surface of what it was. And then I talked to a couple other reps that had been in the State House, and they basically gave me a brief synopsis of what I'd be doing. And they all said the same thing. Don't get on a committee your first year. Just listen, just vote, just do it. And I'm just the stupid guy that said, oh, I'll do 2 committees. So, but
Oh, man.
But that's, again, I did it to myself. But at the end of the day, it's been a learning curve. So
Do you like it?
I do. I think that, labor was great. It's great for me to see perspective of that. But then Health and Human Services, I think for me, that's the one that's kind of brought, things to life, because I'm hearing bills that are going to affect everybody. Labor, it's good. You're going to have things, but really hearing the same thing about, minimum wage and worker rights and all these different things. It's really not. It's all about the same stuff, just relabeled. You know what I mean?
Does it ever get really boring?
I would say that it's not. It's a lot more exciting in Health and Human Services than labor. But again, don't tell anybody on labor I said that. I mean, they're all great committees. Both of the committees. I love the chairmans. I love the vice chairs on both committees because they both bring different things. Like in labor, we've got a committee that moves quickly, and in Health and Human Services, we have a compassionate committee that listens. So, like, that's what you want. You want a committee in health, let's say, that pays attention to the details, and that's what we have. So, in labor, we have a committee that, will look at it. All the people in the committee, or a lot of people in the committee, come from business backgrounds and stuff, so they understand what businesses go through and what they deal with. So,
well, I appreciate you coming all the way up here to do this. This has been fun. And is there anything you want to tell anybody as far as if they can follow you on social media or anything like that?
Yeah, I'm on X. I'm on Facebook. It's Steve Kesselring on X, Steve Kesselring on X, and then I'm Representative Kesselring on Facebook.
On Facebook.
So if you can find all that stuff from my website, stephenkesselring.com. Too.
Okay.
So,
and what do you think after one term? You think you'll run again?
I'm committed to running again because I've taken on the position of the vice chair of the Manchester Republican Committee.
Yep.
Next year, or in 2 years, I'll be the chairman.
Okay.
So because it's a 4-year commitment, so I'm going to stay in politics and everything for at least one more term in the House if I can. Again, I won by 7 votes, and then on
that's one thing I was going to ask you. Didn't you say that you flipped a Democrat seat?
Yeah, we did.
And
several terms it was blue, and we flipped it red. So it
Wow.
was a slight margin, though. I mean, 7 votes on election night. It was a nail biter. And
every
then
vote matters.
Yeah, every vote. I mean, if I didn't go to the polls and talk to everyone and had conversations, I guarantee that it would have gone a different direction.
Absolutely.
But that's why every vote is important.
Yeah. So your re-election is going to probably just be just as tough.
Well, I'm going to work as hard as I can. I'm already trying to connect with anybody that calls me. I call them back. I try to deal with it. I've had a lot of issues that I've tried to help out with already.
Do you think there's some multi-term reps that started out like that in the beginning and now they're
I'm
just
sure.
like
Well, I actually had talked to one of the reps. I think he did 5 terms or 4 terms in the House, and he's like, I look back at my time and it was rewarding, but he goes, don't want to do it again. So, and that's the thing. Most reps, I don't even know what the percentage is. I mean, 60%-ish that serve 1 term or something along those lines. It's not. It's just because of the fact that it's so much work to do.
It's a little money.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But again, it's not for the money for me. It's just to try to make sure that our state, like I said, my daughter, I want to make sure we leave this state, or when my daughter grows up, she's got to take on the mantle doing something. But I want to make sure that we keep it in the right direction for the future.
Yeah.
So.
Well, hey, I'd like to come back anytime you want, and
maybe when I need to get reelected.
Yeah, absolutely. So, thanks for coming, Steve.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.